Right now, somewhere in the world, a child is afraid of the dark, and somewhere else, another child is afraid of being abandoned, of something watching them from the shadows, of a monster they can't see but somehow know is there. This has always been true. It is true today, and it was true 10,000 years ago. But here's what nobody tells you. The ancient Egyptians were afraid of it too. So were the Mesopotamians, the Greeks, the Aztecs, the Vikings, the Aboriginal Australians. Civilizations that never spoke the same language, never traded with each other, never knew the other existed, and yet they all told the same story. They all feared the same thing. And the reason why reaches so deep into what you are that it will change how you see every fear you've ever had. Let's start with the most obvious question. What was it? Not fire, not famine, not war. Those fears make sense. They're rational. They're visible. You can point to them. But the thing every civilization feared was something you couldn't point to, something that came at night, something that wore a familiar face, something that lived at the edge of the world, just beyond where the light reached. Anthropologists call it the universal monster, and it shows up everywhere. In ancient Mesopotamia, over 4,000 years ago, the Sumerians wrote about the Lamashtu, a demon that crept into homes at night and stole sleeping infants. She had the head of a lion, the teeth of a donkey, and the talons of an eagle. She was not a god. She wasn't worshipped. She was something older, something before worship. At almost exactly the same time, on the other side of the planet, the ancient Chinese were documenting the Hundun, a faceless creature of chaos that lurked at the boundaries of the ordered world. Not evil in the human sense, just wrong, fundamentally, cosmically wrong. In ancient Egypt, the demon Apep, also called Apophis, lived beneath the world and tried to swallow the sun every single night. Every night, the priests of Ra performed rituals to fight him off. Every single morning when the sun rose, they believed they had won. Every night, the battle began again. These weren't metaphors. These weren't bedtime stories for children. These were the central terror of entire civilizations. But here's what makes this strange. These cultures didn't share these stories. The Sumerians and the Aboriginal Australians had no contact. The Aztecs and the Norse had never met. And yet, the Aztecs feared Cipactli, a primordial sea monster at the edge of creation. The Norse feared Jormungandr, the world serpent coiled around the edge of existence, waiting. Always at the edge, always in the dark, always formless or half-formed, always hungry. In 2012, anthropologist Dimitris Xygalatas published a study examining fear rituals across cultures. His team analyzed over 600 distinct societies and found something that the data made undeniable. The most elaborate, most emotionally intense, most universal rituals in human history were not rituals of celebration. They were rituals of protection against something formless, something nocturnal, something that came from outside the boundary of the known world. So what was it? Here's what the science says, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It wasn't a monster. It was a memory. Your brain is not a modern machine. The part of your brain that processes fear, the amygdala, is one of the oldest structures in the vertebrate nervous system. It predates language. It predates consciousness as we understand it. It was running threat detection programs millions of years before the first human drew the first cave painting. And for almost all of that time, the threats were real. In the dark, predators moved. Leopards, hyenas, giant snakes, ambush hunters that your eyes couldn't detect, but your body knew were there. The humans who felt an instinctive dread of formless things in the dark, things at the edge of vision, things that moved without sound, things that weren't quite right, those humans survived. The ones who didn't feel that dread got eaten. Over hundreds of thousands of years, that fear was selected into your genome, not as a thought, not as a belief, as a reflex. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux at NYU spent decades mapping the fear circuitry of the brain, and what he found was that fear signals bypass conscious thought almost entirely. Something triggers your amygdala, and your body is already reacting, heart rate up, muscles tensed, attention narrowed, before your cortex has even registered that something happened. Before you know you're afraid, you already are. And the triggers for this ancient fear system are remarkably specific. Darkness, edges, things that are almost human but not quite, things that move when they shouldn't, things you can hear but not see. Sound familiar? Every monster in every mythology hits these exact triggers. The Lamashtu crept in at night. Apophis lived beneath the world, at the edge. The Hundun was faceless, almost something but not quite. Jormungandr circled the boundary of the known world, always at the edge, always in the dark, always formless or half-formed, always hungry. In the 1970s, psychologist Paul Rosen at the University of Pennsylvania began studying what he called core disgust, a revulsion response that appears to be universal across cultures. Things that are wrong at a fundamental level, things that violate the boundary between living and dead, things that are contaminated, things that are ambiguous, neither fully one thing nor another. He found that these responses were nearly identical across cultures that had no contact with each other. The same things that triggered disgust in Americans triggered disgust in rural Indian communities, in isolated Pacific Islander populations, in tribal groups in rural Africa. And when he traced the evolutionary logic, the answer was the same as fear. These responses kept our ancestors alive. Avoid the rotting thing. Avoid the ambiguous creature. Avoid the formless entity at the edge of the camp. The monster in every mythology isn't a cultural invention. It's a species memory, encoded, ancient, still running. Which means the story doesn't end in history. It ends with you. Tonight, when the lights go out and you hear a sound you can't identify and something in you tightens before you've even processed what you heard, that's not irrational. That's 400 million years of survival code executing exactly as designed. The ancient Egyptians built entire temple complexes to manage that feeling. The Sumerians carved stone tablets. The Norse wove it into the fabric of their cosmos. They took the oldest fear in the animal kingdom and turned it into pyramids, into epics, into cathedrals. Every civilization that has ever existed has looked into the dark, felt the same thing you feel, and asked the same question. What is out there? The real answer, the one science has now given us, is both more and less terrifying than any monster they imagine. Nothing is out there. The monster was never in the dark. It was always in you. And it was put there by every ancestor who survived the night long enough to become your ancestor. It is the price of being here. It is the cost of every generation that made it to morning. So the next time you feel that ancient, wordless dread, that sense that something is watching, that the dark is not empty, that the edge of the room is somehow wrong, remember, you are not afraid. You are remembering.